The following is a presentation of the Falcon Media Sports Network, WBGU 88.1 FM, and BG Falcon Media. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining us here on the Zig Zone, another episode of the only show focused on everything going on in Bowling Green athletics. I'm your host, Holden Ruck, and I could not be more excited to talk about what I think is maybe the best weekend of Falcon athletics we've had yet, or one, if not the best. But before we get talking about that, I'm going to introduce everybody joining me here in the Cooling Center studios. To start with, our Falcon Media Sports Network sports content director, as well as soccer expert, Mr. Lucas Kleinmeyer.
Men's soccer made me cry of happiness this weekend.
Our Falcon Media Sports Network production director and one of our basketball beat writers, Mr. Tyler Kavalitz.
Tomorrow for the start of basketball season cannot come soon enough.
Another one of our basketball beats, Mr. Artie Abrego.
As Tyler said, men's basketball starts tomorrow. We're all very excited about it.
Guy with probably the most full plate lately. Hopefully it'll smooth out a little bit for you, but Mr. Ben Korek, our volleyball and hockey expert.
I guarantee you it won't smooth out, but it was a very fun weekend. Both teams did very well. 4 wins for my sports, so very fun stuff.
Gotta love it. And joined for the first time on the Zig Zone, I believe, Mr. Nick Windholtz, one of our star videographers.
Stop it. You shouldn't have.
Glad to have you here, Nick. We're going to get into the action very quickly. Our own Henry Costco, our women's soccer beat, is going to call in and tell us about the action that just concluded for them today. But before we do, we're going to step away for station identification. But before we do that, we're going to tell you about the action going on in our sister station of Falcon Radio. It's November now, which means it's 90s November. You can tune into Falcon Radio to hear all your favorite throwback hits from the 90s all throughout the month of November. To tune into Falcon Radio, you can find it on bgfalconmedia.com. Don't go anywhere. We're going to be back with our women's soccer details in just a moment. You're listening to the Zig Zone on WBGU 88.1 FM.
This is Lucas Kleinmeyer, and you are listening to 88.1 FM WBGU Bowling Green, home of the Falcon Media Sports Network.
Looking for a BGSU Athletics talk radio show? Tune into the Zig Zone every Sunday at 4 p.m., where a panel of Falcon Media Sports Network members discuss the hottest BG sports topics. Only on WBGU 88.1 FM.
Welcome back to the Zig Zone show. We are going to get right into talking about our women's soccer action, and we are joined by Mr. Henry Costco. Can you hear me, Henry?
We can't hear him.
No, he's not coming through here.
Henry, are you there?
Henry, we miss you.
Henry, we miss you, buddy. None of the rest of us can talk about women's soccer.
Hey, well, watch yourself.
No, we
over
can.
there.
We can.
I'm out of my depth
promise.
here, so I think either
Yeah.
Lucas or Henry probably would prefer.
Okay, Henry, come on.
Henry, we miss you.
Can you hear me now?
Oh,
Yay!
yeah, we can.
Now, there
Yes,
he is.
sir.
Henry, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good, man.
All right, well, you were there, so you can take us, or you were covering, rather, I should say, the game today, so why don't you take us through what happened?
Yeah, well, I'll start by taking you through sort of the week that the team has had. Sort of Kent State on Thursday, which was the game they were coming off the big 2-0 win at Akron. Going to Kent State, start off with a 1-1 draw at half, lose the lead, eventually get up to a 2-1 lead and lose the lead, down to a 4-2 loss after Kent State kind of took the offensive advantage in the second half. And then you come here for the MAC tournament here at the quarterfinal in Athens, and you look at the result, and it's not necessarily something that, they wanted to see, but it's a game that they have to play against the third-seeded Ohio team in Athens. And they go out there, and they concede the 1-0 goal in the first half. LA Beavers got with the corner kick that gave them the goal. But, as they got into the second half, you saw a lot better things. You saw them take advantage of the offensive pressure that they were having. They had some quality chances, especially after set pieces. And Terra probably had the best chance that we saw all game with a free kick right outside the box that really had needed a great save from Sloma to avoid that goal. But it was a great defensive performance all around from Ohio that really kept BG off the board. BG had 6 shots compared to only 3 from Ohio. They had 3 shots on goal compared to only 2 from Ohio, so they had the offensive pressure, but the goal just wasn't necessarily there.
And I want to backtrack a little bit because it feels like one of those situations that could have looked a lot different for the Falcons. Were they able to come away with that win at Kent State?
Yeah, well, that's definitely true. That was the day where we had 5, even 6 teams in contention for 3 spots there at the end. NIU and Toledo eventually ended up being out, while Kent State, with the win, moved up to the 4th seed, and they hosted that MAC tournament game where they just beat Miami to move on to the semifinal. So that was a pivotal game, and that's a game that they definitely wanted to win, and it would have given them a lot of a better chance to get a better result in the MAC tournament for sure. As one stat that I found, this team hasn't played on the road in the MAC tournament in 20 years. The last away game that they played was in 2004. So it was in really unforeseen territory, and this loss is the first time they haven't made the MAC semifinals since 2016. So I think having a home game would have definitely helped them in that situation. And Ohio is one of those teams where you're playing Aaron Rodgers, you're playing the back-to-back, or a team that's going for back-to-back MAC tournament championships, and it's a game you're going to be an underdog automatically, especially when you're playing there, and especially when you lost 3-0 to them at Cochran earlier in the year. And I think all things considered, they played well. 1-0 loss and having more offensive pressure and having the system work out well the way it did. I think we saw good things from them.
Henry, I know you and I both cover both soccer programs here at Bowling Green. Obviously, I'm more with men's, you're more with women's. But for you, obviously, just an hour removed from the season ending. But if you kind of just had to summarize this season under Chris Fox in his first year at the helm, how would you summarize it, and would you say it's a success or not?
Well, that's a tough question, Lucas. I think there's 2 ways you can look at it. I think the first way you can look at it as you can say, just based on past success, based on the 4 straight MAC championships, before the season, that it's a failure, and that even just making the MAC tournament isn't enough for this program that has players on this roster that have won MAC championships and that wanted to get back there. And I think that's a way that you can look at it. Another way you can look at it is this is a team that lost a lot coming from last year. Jimmy Walker, I mean, just saying, as him as a coach, we've seen the success that he's had at Creighton already this year, and I think losing him as a program is a big loss. And they also lost 3 out of 5 of their captains, on top of Emily Gardner and Ellie Poole being out. And I think really all you need to hear in terms of what they've expected from younger players is Emmy Butera and Taylor Green, 2 sophomores, have led the team in minutes. So this is a team that had a lot of young talent that's played well, but they don't have the experience that some teams with these rosters that are sort of in their prime, like Western Michigan with their now back-to-back undefeated MAC regular seasons, and the team that Aaron Rodgers is heading at Ohio that basically brought back their entire roster, and what Sean Burke is doing at Buffalo as well. You look at those teams and you say, and you look at this roster and you compare the two, and you say, I don't know if this team was really set to compete. And I think what we saw from Fox's system was that it has potential and that it can work. What he needs is a couple more years to build a roster around him and build some standings with some other transfers, maybe get some new players in and see what happens from there.
Now, Henry, you mentioned new transfers and some new players in. Now that the season's over, it's very soon after being over, but what immediate changes, I guess, do you expect in this offseason for this team?
What do I expect? It's tough to tell. I think as far as what they're going to retain, I think they'll retain Emmy Butera. I think they'll retain Taylor Green, Michelle Oakstad, these younger players, sophomores, freshmen, that will be coming up that have been valuable pieces for this team that will be coming back to stay with Fox. I think some of the changes that you may see may come with maybe some juniors. Like, we'll see what Bryn Gardner, what Madison Vukas do in terms of if they want to stay or if they want to go. And I think, I think we'll see a good way to compare it is maybe what we saw from Todd Simon last year and all the transfers that he brought in, all the transfers that he brought in this year in order to fit the system that he likes to play in order to fit, the way that he likes to run. He needs the right players, and especially if he wants to compete with all these teams that already have these coaches that have found the players that they like. I think he's going to need to make some moves, and the world is his oyster, really. I'm sure as a coach, it's pretty fun for him to be able to go out and recruit these players, try to find these transfers that will come in, and I expect to see some shakeups, and I'm excited to see what he does.
And it really seems to me, and you may or may not disagree with this, but I feel like it's really hard to apply a fair measuring stick until we've seen what he's able to do with time to kind of establish his own setup, as you're kind of saying.
Right. Yeah, it's going to take time, and especially coming off of all the success that Matt Fannin had in past years and that Jimmy Walker had this year, and you see him coming from Morehead State, and you see him transferring this new system. The thing that gives me the most confidence is that there are players that are still buying into it, and that there were players that saw success, and that it won't be the same world where Jimmy Walker had these Bryn Gardner excelling as a striker. It's going to be more a system that will attract midfielders, a system that will attract defenders, and it will be a team that will be one of the best defenses in the MAC and maybe even in Division I at its peak, and it's a team that will have some of the best midfielders in the MAC at its peak. And it's going to be a different age. You can't expect the same things as you saw in the past. And again, we'll just have to wait and see. There's no way to tell right now, 2 hours after the scene's over, what we're going to see. But if you can make guesses, that's what I would like to see, and I think that's what will bring them the most success.
And one more thing I will say regarding today's performance that lingers in my mind, I think back to the 0-0 draw against Eastern Michigan and what I believe was the home competition finale for the team. And I remember Coach Fox saying in post-game that to him, they were finding some good looks, but just not really finishing on it and not finding enough good looks. And seeing, losing by a goal is not certainly the worst performance by any means. That can, indicate a close game. But at the same time, consistently being unable to, register a goal on the score sheet feels like something that could be a lingering concern and something they have to focus on.
Sure. There's a couple different ways, again, that you can interpret that. I think the best way to look at it is you can look at the stat sheet over the overall cumulative statistics of the year, and you can look that Lexi Zerwin is the leading goal scorer at a midfield position as a graduate student when she didn't really have an offensive role. And I think, and then you look at Emmy Butera, who is the defensive midfielder, who, because of her crazy Olympico goal Thursday against Kent State, is tied with Bryn Gardner at 7 points, who was the goal leader for the team last year. And I mean, you look at it, and all these players are just having to change their roles around, right? Bryn Gardner was more of a chaser. She was more of a role where she had to play a lot more crosses into the box rather than get the ball in the box and score. And it was a big adjustment, and some players, you could see that some players got the benefit of it just based on the system, and others didn't. And again, that's just something that will take adjustment, and it will take, new players who are born into the system in regards to coming into Division I with it. And again, that also comes into the play of what Bryn Gardner will do in the offseason. If she decides to spend another year adapting into her new role, or if she decides to go somewhere else and seek maybe her past glory of last year.
Henry, I think one of the biggest things just watching this team all year long is you can tell that some of the players are clearly getting Chris Fox's system and understanding his message and buying into it. And then there's some of the players that are not buying in, but there's also just some of those veteran players that are in their last year of eligibility or were going to in their senior season, and they knew they were done for this year anyway, so they probably just didn't care as much as trying to adapt to the system as much, and were just looking for being part of a team. Yeah. Who are some of the players for you that felt like really enjoyed playing Chris Fox's style of soccer this year, really helped out? Obviously, it was a lot of the underclassmen, but are going to be players that are going to be good for the future, but also what are some players that you feel like were expected to be good this year, but probably didn't do as well as what they should have been just on like preseason projections?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you look at one specific spot, and I mean, I hit on it before, is the forward position, and I think really all of the forwards were maybe expected to produce a little bit more. I already talked about Bryn Gardner, but Emma Stransky as well. She had maybe the best year out of all the forwards, and it was a year that didn't, get her within reach of any of the top goal marks, point marks in the MAC, and, you look at what Lizzie Boltnick did last year as a forward, and you look at how little she really produced this year coming off the bench is maybe playing 20, 30 minutes a game in a substitute forward role. And, I think you look at those players and you say, okay, they came here expecting to be an attacking striker and they expected to score goals, and now Coach Fox comes in and that's not necessarily the role that they're in. So, again, that's just players that you'll see maybe make some decisions in the future or maybe adapt into their new role. But some players that I really did like to see as underclassmen, I already hit on Butera, I already hit on Taylor Green, how they are really perfect. I mean, Butera, I'm sure I'll talk to him about really how much of a perfect fit Butera is in terms of that just kind of that she completes both the defense and the attack in terms of the defensive midfield position that she plays, the possession that she holds, and her collaboration with Michelle Hochstadt, who obviously had a year under Fox, had plenty of years playing professionally in Germany, and she came over and she adapts as maybe, you could say it's a bit more hybrid of a European style of play, and she's adapted to it very well. I expect to see her excel in upcoming years, as well as I saw good things, I think, from Lauren Mahoney, the freshman coming in. She scored her 2 goals in the opener against Detroit Mercy, and she didn't really score since, but we saw good things in terms of her making the start today, her having quality minutes today. I think that proves really her quality that we've seen in terms of on the ball, right? She's able to, make those crosses and give players those chances, and she's also very quick. She's able to play quality defense, and that's a player that I think I'll be watching a lot in coming years.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head there with terms of the players. I think if you had to pick the player of the season, I think you have to go with Butera or Taylor Green for sure.
For sure.
All right, well, with the season wrapping up, it looks like there will be a lot to keep your eyes trained on in this offseason as we see where the trajectory of Chris Fox's program is going to go in the second year. Henry, one more thing before we wrap this up here, just because there was mention of it so many times, and I'd be remiss if I didn't ask for a little bit of clarification. This system that Chris Fox has, this new system, can you explain that one more? No, I'm playing. I'm not going to make you explain that. I just wanted to give you crap about it.
One more time.
Oh no, I was riffing on the Chris Fox system. God knows you've been asked enough times. Well, I think that is going to wrap it up for Women's Soccer for us today, though. So thank you for calling in, Henry. Appreciate hearing from you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
All right.
Have a good show, guys.
All right. With that, we are going to move along to our men's soccer discussion, which I will let Lucas Kleinmeyer take away because I'm sure he has been just itching to get started.
That was 3 pounds on the desk, and those were 3 goals that Bowling Green scored past number 14, Western Michigan. Oh my goodness. I don't think I've had more fun covering a game in my 3 years at Bowling Green than I did on Friday night against Western Michigan. That was probably one of the best performances all around by Eric Nichols' team since probably the NCAA tournament in 2021. Just from start to finish, from the opening whistle to the end, you can just tell how much the team wanted it. From Brendan Graves to the back line, to the midfield, to the front line, every player played incredible. And you can't really be too critical about anyone on a Friday. They all put in an amazing shift. Really just such a team effort on Friday. And you had a weird feeling going into the game. Western Michigan showed signs of a lot of draws and dropping points, but they were unbeaten in 37 games, regular season games, coming into that night. And then when Alberto Anaya's free kick went in the first half and BJ had a lead going to halftime, then you really got a good feeling that they could really come away with at least a draw, but even take all 3 points, which is what they did. And then the second half, Western Michigan played with a lot more urgency than they did in the first 45. You saw a lot more balls in the box. They played a lot more Bronco-style soccer as we've seen in the past, which means they're very physical and they're really good at drawing fouls somehow, which I don't know how they're good at that, but Chad Wiseman teams are very good at doing that for some reason. They put a lot of balls in the box, but Brendan Graves had an excellent game, especially in terms of reading the defense and in coming off his line and collecting balls. The backline as well, Josh Erlinson, Kyle Kusamato, and Gus Peacock probably played the best 3 games as they've had all season long that night. Jake Bergen as well in the midfield, from the defensive midfielder point. He had like 3 block shots, I want to say, in the game. He was incredible, including blocking off a cross that was right in front of the face of the goal in the first half, which when the game was still 0-0. And then Bowling Green kind of just really tried to hit and counter in the second half, and they did so with Trace Terry and Bennett Painter scoring a goal each in the second half to put kind of the icing on the cake and win 3-0. I honestly, Holden and everyone, I can't stress like how well they played, because that Western Michigan team is going to be in the NCAA tournament. They're probably going to, they're going to be in the Missouri Valley tournament. They'll probably make a run again. That's a very good team. That's a team we haven't been to a decade to that day. That's a team that's had our number for 9-10 years, and we're, like I mentioned, ranked 14th in the country. That win is massive for that team's morale, especially for going into the rest of the season, which they have one regular season game left, but now the Missouri Valley Conference play, because now they can play with anybody. They did lose to Missouri State, but they played very well against Missouri State, and that game came down to moments, and they didn't meet their moments. Missouri State did. Missouri State's also the best team in the conference, so give them credit this year. Drake was a team they tied, and they're going to finish second overall. That's another team that, if they played again, they could definitely find a way to win. And now that they beat Western Michigan, there is not a single team that they cannot compete against and win. They can also lose, because this conference is very close. There's a lot of teams that are very close together, but this team is fully capable of making a run at the Missouri Valley Conference tournament and to earn a tournament championship and get in the NCAA tournament. But also now, with that win over Western Michigan, they're up to 10 wins now. They're going to be in contention for a bid regardless of what happens in the tournament. So, I mean, there's that there. It's been such a great season for them, especially with everything that happened last year with Eric Nichols personally and his family. The way they've come back out this year with a very veteran group, it's been awesome. And that Friday night was my favorite game I've ever called, I've ever covered, because that program deserved it, and they've earned it with all the hard work they've done over the years.
And you look at a win of that caliber in particular against any ranked program, anytime a Bowling Green team can take a ranked win, I mean, that's something that you're going to have to really celebrate and revel in a little bit.
It feels like almost the stars were aligning for that to happen, with the kind of bad loss to Evansville the week before. Trace Terry coming off of suspension, probably quite upset that he didn't get to play in that Evansville game, plus the loss as well. I mean, 10 years to the day, there's a pretty sizable crowd there as well, and then just the electricity that went along with it. I mean, come on, it's impossible not to enjoy what happened, whether you're a soccer fan, not a soccer fan, casual. It's just such a fantastic thing to happen to BGSU athletics in general. I mean, anytime that you have a strong case at a bid to the NCAA tournament in any sport, it is. You're doing something right, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, and at the same time, obviously, you know this, Ben, hockey was going on against Fair State, which we'll talk about, when the president, who is at every hockey game in the president's box, is watching the game on his phone, and then leaves a little bit early to come over to the stadium. It's right next to each other. Slate and Cochran right next to each other, to come over and talk to coach.
Not to mention flashing scores and on the video board in the Slater.
Yeah.
Because that's just how impactful that game was. And especially, I obviously was calling the game. I didn't get to watch it. I had the game up on my phone, and Holden, I believe it was you, that gave me the alert that Anaya had scored a goal. I'm like, man, 1-0 if they could only hold on. Yeah. Then you saw the Trace Terry goal, and then you saw the Bennett Painter goal, and it's like, there's no way this is happening, that men's soccer just outscored hockey on the same day, only 300 yards apart. But, it is just absolutely fantastic.
Well, and what made that one even better is
that Ben called it last week on the Zig Zone.
That too.
Yes.
That's true. That made it good.
And I picked Trace Terry as my goal scorer, so I was 2 for 2 on the game.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I'll pull up the clip after this.
Like, with that Evansville loss they had last week, they needed to win, because if they didn't win, they wouldn't have gotten a home tournament game.
It's almost like it was better that they lost to Evansville in a weird way.
Kinda.
Almost.
You do have to wonder a little bit if you've got that same fire behind your play, if you're not feeling a little bit.
Like, would you have rather
doubted,
beat
maybe
Evansville and lost to Western Michigan, or would you rather have beat Western Michigan and lost to Evansville? Like, obviously, you would have rather beat Western for the first time in 10 years and a ranked team. Yeah. How important is this Oregon State game now that they're going all the way out, and for bid wise?
I would say bid-wise, it's very important. Oregon State was in the Final Four last year in the NCAA tournament. They haven't had a good year this year. They're not ranked, but they're good. One of the few remaining West Coast teams with the whole Pac-12 situation going on.
Yeah.
They're still a very good program. It's a great experience for them. I mean, there's not often you can fly all the way out west to the West Coast. They have a great stadium, great program, historically very successful, a couple MLS draft picks. So a win out there is very impressive, especially with the travel, and get your 11th win of the season. They would have a great record.
Is there win possibility for Bowling Green and Oregon State? Is there like a decent chance, just like one of the Missouri Valley Conference games, that we come away with a win and even stronger schedule?
Possibly. And realistically, they're not going to be. They're more concerned with the experience of the game. They just want to go out there and have a good game and try to win, because since there's 9 teams in the Missouri Valley, one team doesn't play last week of the season, and this year it's us. And all their games are going on at the exact same time as us, so they're probably going to be scoreboard watching those games just to see where they land, because they're going to finish either 3rd or 4th in the Valley, which will be a home game regardless. But they'll play either Western Michigan again at home, or they're going to play UIC, who they lost to this year at home. So depends on where they finish. I don't really think it matters. Really, I think this game is just purely just experience based only, and trying to come away with the win. So if you want to get a bid this year, you can come away and say, well, we flew all the way to Oregon at the last game of the season and got their 11th win of the season.
Is it? I'll show my lack of knowledge a little bit. Is it conventional for a team to have a game like this? It's kind of an out-of-conference bout here, or is it just the nature of the number of teams in the conference in this case?
For Bowling Green, it's very uncommon because usually they end with a conference team. I think it's just because of the nature of the conference, because there's just an uneven amount of teams, so one team's always going to have an extra game left. And I think with this game, it's kind of weird. It's this late in the year with the non-conference opponent, but I think this is just the only time they could get it in, because this is the first year that the season has extended a little bit for men's soccer. So I think this was just Nichols' way of just getting them a great experience against a great program and just finding any date they could to do it. And they probably knew they were going to be the one team that was left out anyway, because all the other teams are playing the last week of the season. So.
Do you, looking ahead a little bit at the Missouri Valley Conference tournament, Bowling Green in good position to host a game? Who do they project to play against, and how do you foresee the tournament panning out for them, Lucas?
They project Western again. They project to finish 4th. Right now they're in 3rd. They project to finish 4th and play Western Michigan again, which it's hard to beat a team twice, let alone Western Michigan twice. So that would be very interesting.
What do they have to do to get that 3rd? Or I guess what else has to happen for us to get that 3rd seed?
So the big game you got to watch this weekend is Evansville playing Belmont. Evansville is in 4th right now with 12 points. We're on 13. They play Belmont, who are already not making the tournament. Belmont needs to beat Evansville in order for us to keep 3rd. If not, even if they tie, Evansville will jump us on 13 because they beat us head-to-head. So that needs to happen for us to get 3rd. So realistically, or more likely, we're going to end up going 4th. But if we were to finish 3rd, then we'll play UIC at the 6th seed. Or if we go down to 4th, we'll probably play Western Michigan. It's going to be either one of those two teams. We can't play anyone else. It just depends on how the game shakes out. And funny enough, I believe Western Michigan and UIC both play each other last game of the season. And they do. And it's at Western Michigan, and it's only a 1-point difference. So that's another big game to watch as well.
So you look at it, and it's pretty much just a matter of who plays who, even with Missouri State and Drake are only separated by 2 points. Can those two still flip-flop?
And guess who plays each other?
Missouri State and Drake, I'm going to guess.
Yep. So if Drake wins the conference in the regular season, and they'll host a tournament all the way in Iowa. And I think you've told everybody, especially me before the season, that Drake would be a game away from winning the conference the last game of the season, I would have laughed in your face and walked away, because they were the abject worst team in the conference last year. I don't think they won a game, maybe one, I want to say, last year in the conference, and so they've been the surprise of the conference by far. I mean, they're the only team we haven't beaten at Cochran Stadium this year. They're the only draw we had. So I mean, they've been amazing this year. So that's another game to watch as well, because a Drake win and they're in first place. But Missouri State's very good. Missouri State's very good, so I would bet in favor of the
Well, and again,
Bears.
like you said, we were a score away from beating Missouri State, and what I think was a bad call on Trace Terry that got him suspended. But you were a score away from beating Missouri State. You beat Western Michigan. Is there any team? You said you tied Drake at home, I believe. So I mean, the teams that are ahead of you've had either pretty solid games or beaten. So is there anything that you can't really do? Is there any expected loss through the playoffs? I think there's a decent chance at a run.
There's a great chance for a run because
And you have two of the top 100 players
yes,
in the nation too.
true.
Two of the best scorers
Yeah,
in the Valley.
Yeah, that game just proved they can play with anybody and also compete and also finally win. Because that's the thing is, well, we can compete with these top teams, but they never win, and because they always draw or they eventually just lose because of one bad play or one moment. But this conference is very tough this year, and it's very hard to predict. I think the only safe bet, obviously, is Missouri State and Drake are going to finish top 2 because Bowling Green or Evansville can't catch them. But yeah, I mean, all these teams, the 6 that are going to get in, Missouri State, Drake, BG, Evansville, Western Michigan, USC, are all very tough teams. And I mean, even Western Michigan, who are having a not good conference record this year, are still going to be nationally ranked when the polls probably come out, and they're very well equipped to make a run. Yeah, I mean, this conference is very unpredictable. I don't think you can really predict anything in the tournament. I think you just have to watch and see how it happens because of how tight everything's been this year.
Something that's lingering in my mind a little bit, and I want to circle back to about the Western game itself, because you were there, Lucas, so you can certainly attest to this more. I was in the studio, board operating with Ben, as we talked about. Did it feel
Thank you,
at
Holden.
all, anytime, did it feel at all like Western wasn't playing the same caliber that they're usually playing, or was it really just that standout of a performance from Bowling Green?
They definitely were not playing up to their standard in the first half. Second half, they definitely looked more like Western Michigan.
Just something I saw in particular when I looked in the middle of the hockey game, when I looked at the Western score and saw that BG was up 1, was the shots on goal discrepancy was insane. It was
Yeah.
at one point it was like 8-1 or something in favor of the Falcons.
Yeah, for sure. It was very Western Michigan had moments in the first half, but they didn't really put anything on frame outside of one Noah James header that flashed just wide of the goal, wasn't on target. But the second, there was a very clear difference between the first half and second half. Second half they had chances, but again, Brendan Graves just played great, and they weren't able to really put anything really on target to really test him. Graves just had to come out and kind of like collect the ball and come out of his box to just clear the ball away. The intensity of Western Michigan definitely was not there, and their head coach talked about it a little bit. He basically said, Bowling Green deserved the win. They were better at everything than us tonight. And I mean, Western Michigan kind of, it's fair to say, it probably overlooked Bowling Green a little bit. I mean, they beat them 9 straight, or at least never lost, and they're more focused on how they're going to do in the tournament and how they do against ranked opponents, because they've beaten a lot of ranked teams this year and play a lot of quality opponents. There's a very good chance their mindset wasn't completely focused, and they probably thought they were going to just come in and stroll and get a victory, but that was definitely not the case, because that game meant everything to Bowling Green. That game for Western Michigan kind of was just another game for them, and they were very flat. I would say if they play again in the tournament, that is not going to be the case at all. I think you'll see a completely different Western Michigan team, and a team that's probably you're more used to seeing, which is physical, strong, fast, discipline, stuff that they were not on Friday. But Cochran Stadium's magic, man. There's been some magic in Cochran Stadium this year. It's been a very tough place to play for all teams.
Lot to love. We will see the men's soccer team in action again. They will travel to Oregon State for their season finale, and then the ensuing MAC tournament where they will match up.
Missouri Valley tournament,
where they will match up against.
Lucas, are you going out to Oregon to call that one?
No.
No.
I think the plane leaves in 5 minutes, but I could probably get there.
Oh, okay. So no.
Hitchhike.
No. There's an
You're not gonna
there's an
fly
election
yourself
going on
Take a
Tuesday.
nice
I don't know
jog.
if you heard of it.
Yeah, no, I do know that.
I'll be in volleyball with you Tuesday, actually.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Volleyball,
Yeah,
Battle by
There you go.
75.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
you go. Big
Yeah.
one. Well, we're going to move to that very quickly. So we will go ahead and start talking about volleyball, who also had a phenomenal weekend. Ben, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, they had a 3-1 match in the first game against Miami, Ohio, and then in the second game they had a 3-set sweep. Unfortunately, that first match in 4 sets was 4 sets that broke their sweeping record, which was they were last four in a row were sweeps for the Falcons, and then they had the 4 set, and then they swept in the second one. So that's kind of the state of the program now that we're looking at wins and constituting sweeps. But yeah, they looked fantastic doing what they've done all year, just distributing the ball around, everybody having a part. Amanda Otten was amazing. Their back row was great. They had a bunch of hitters involved. Edita Veswapchik played like the entire second game against Miami of Ohio, which was really cool to see. It was almost like she was a starter, actually. I wasn't able to listen because of hockey, but I asked Chaz McNeil, our other volleyball beat, if she started the game because she just played that much. And the last she didn't, but she played an amazing amount of the game. I think she was tied for second in kills. So it was nice to see. We're seeing this weekend and last weekend what they've done a lot of the year against good teams, now against bad teams. They're not really playing down to competition. They kind of had very strong weekends. So it's very nice. That's the main thing I was worried about getting into this easier stretch of Kent State. Was last in the MAC. Miami of Ohio is second to last in the MAC. NIU this coming week is third to last in the MAC. They're all bottom 3, so you can't really get complacent in those games, and they really haven't. They've kind of just played their game, worked on the things they have to work on, pounded the rock, and have done a very good job of that.
And something that really, I think, is optimism inspiring about the team's performance on the weekend is, as you said, we have really gotten to the point where we look at them not getting a sweep and it's like, mild letdown. Not really, but
yeah, it's not the fact that they are winning still, it's the fact that it's how they're winning. They're winning very strong.
And you look at
like
that
in the first 4 set, they won 25-15, 25-16. The third set, which is the one they lost, it went to 29. It was 29-27 Miami, and then they came back in the fourth and won 25-23. So they didn't even 2 of the 4 sets. Miami of Ohio didn't even get to 20, and they had to take them to extras to beat them in that other set.
Right. It's hard to say that they're losing dramatically when you make a team score 29
and then
to beat you in one set.
Yeah, and then in the second game, it was 20, 19, and 19 for Miami of Ohio. So in 2 of those 3 sets, they didn't even reach 20. And that's just how they're beating teams. I mean, we saw 5-setters and reverse comebacks against good, very good teams, and we can expect to see that. But this team is just by far better than anybody else they've played in the last few weeks for sure, and maybe one of, if not. I mean, ranking-wise, they are the best team in the MAC, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a reason that any other team is better than Bowling Green.
Well, and if you want to talk about the best team in the MAC, I think it's also important to look at, there was a result that you and I talked about on Friday rooting for and didn't get it, but Saturday that was able to come. Ohio took down the Central Michigan squad to displace them from first in the MAC. How big is that to you?
Yeah, I never like to root against teams necessarily. I like to root for my own teams, but I was for sure rooting against Central Michigan. And I believe it was a 5-set match. Ohio was up 2-0 in the first game or the first match of the weekend, and ended up coming all the way back reverse sweep style. And then in the second match, they split the first 4, and then Ohio finally won. And with that, Central falls to 10-3. Bowling Green's at 11-2. They can't have a tie at the end of the season because Central owns that tiebreaker. They have a head-to-head win. So the Falcons are in a fantastic place, not just to finish first, which we've argued about this amongst ourselves before. I don't think that a regular season MAC championship means a whole lot. I think you got to win the tournament, but you finish first, you get home in the Stroh Center for the MAC tournament. Every single game happens in the Stroh Center, and that's just an unreal home field advantage or home court advantage to let go by. You almost have to finish first. That's your best chance of winning the MAC tournament championship, and so Central losing was a huge outcome for the Falcons. Huge outcome.
Well, and as you said, the Falcons are in a great position now, but it is contingent on them continuing to do what they've done. And what I think maybe is contentious, but what I think could be their hardest or most important remaining test of the regular season happens this Tuesday.
Yeah. And I believe that it is their hardest. Toledo's 8-5, but they had to kind of a weaker start, and they've been winning since. They beat Central, they beat Eastern, which is two of the teams that we've lost to. I think they're a very strong team. They have great hitters. Izzy Granger and Taylor Alt, definitely people to look out for. Bowling Green's got to be wary of that. They earlier in the season, Toledo took the first 2 sets when they played in Savage Arena, and then next Bowling Green took the next 3, complete domination. That was like the start of our obsessive fandom over Bowling Green, and just like, all right, reverse sweep. And then that same weekend they beat Western Michigan in both, and it was just like, okay, this team's the real deal. And they're continuing to prove it every game. But Toledo was by no means a bad team, and they're going to be our toughest opponent left. We have NAU after them, and then I believe it's Ohio the week after, and then we have MAC championship. So I think this is our or the team's hardest challenge left on the schedule for sure. It's going to come down to hitting and blocking, as a lot of the times it does. And I like Bowling Green's chances, but again, it's a battle of I-75. We beat them in their place. You can't not expect them to at least come out with a challenge in our place. And it's going to be a very good game. Definitely one to look out for. I'm sure every team in the MAC is going to be looking at that one to see what happens to the number one seed. So,
yeah, certainly. I think you look at it and it maybe doesn't carry the same way. I know everybody points to football when you look at the I-75 rivalry, but I think it's pretty true across all of the sports that, I mean, the two schools always play each other hard, and kind of regardless of what competition they're looking at.
And Toledo is on the verge of falling out of the tournament. I mean, they're at the 6th space, and if I'm not mistaken, it's only the top 6 seeds. So they're 8-5, Eastern 7-6, and just out of it. If they lose again, and Eastern, I don't know if they play on Tuesday. If Eastern wins again, they are also battling for a playoff spot, and if it stands how it is right now, we're going to face them in the first round of the MAC championship too. So this game is huge, setting the tone, maintaining your top spot. It just so much rides on this game over the weekend, and setting yourself up for good things the rest of the year.
Yeah, and it's certainly a daunting task to face a team that may be in that kind of desperation mode where they know they have to play their absolute best for their season to even stay alive. So I've got one other question for you, Ben. If you had to your best ability, tell me who you think the team MVP is for the season to this point, or who may be the most instrumental piece in a MAC tournament run or championship.
Right now?
Who would you pick?
See, I don't want to choose Lauren Hovey, and not because she's not good, but because we talk about her a lot. But her freshman year, she dominated in the MAC tournament. She did so good last year in the MAC tournament as well. She was playing okay until the MAC started, and then she took a step forward, huge leap. She's maintained that since. I'd expect her to take another leap as soon as we get into the MAC championship. Lauren Hovey's just impossible not to say. Amanda Otten's going to be an interesting one to see as well, because last year she was hurt before we got into the MAC tournament. She didn't really get to play. They're all meaningful, but the meaningful part of the MAC season and into the MAC tournament, she didn't get to play. So you're going to have her this year. She's a extreme asset. So I'd say those two. If I had to choose one, it'd probably be Lauren Hovey. Just versatility. She gets digs. She gets so many digs. She blocks, she gets aces, she kills all the time, high efficiency certain games. She's the dynamic player for the Falcons, definitely the X factor. If you ask my opinion, one of the, if not the best players in the MAC. I think coming into the season, she was only really behind Logan Case, and Logan Case has had a very good year, but not to the level of Lauren Hovey. So I'd definitely say Lauren Hovey's your player to watch, MVP of the season, and going into the rest of the season in MAC championship, she's got to be clicking for the Falcons to have the best success possible.
To kind of follow up on that question, just because we obviously talk about Lauren Hovey a lot, who do you think is most underrated member of this team?
Oh, that's a great question. I'd say Alexis Mattel. I don't think we talk about her enough, because as a middle blocker, her hitting is always behind Lauren Hovey, Mia Tyler, Jordan Newblatt in some points. Her blocking is not as strong as Jessica Andrews and Amanda Otten in the center. We hear about them a lot, but she's so efficient when she gets offensive chances. She's definitely a leader. The 5th year, yeah, I think she's. We don't talk about her enough for how much that she does for the team. She subs out a lot. Middle blockers do when they have to rotate to the back row, but she serves as well. She gets a decent amount of aces. She gets kills. Not a lot of errors, which is amazing to see that you're not giving points to the other team. Doesn't get blocked a lot. She's got a very powerful arm. She's definitely one of the underrated. Just by nature of position, she's one of the lower end hitters because you have options ahead of her, but she's a great option when she's on the court and an absolutely fantastic player.
Ben, where can we find coverage for Tuesday's home game against Toledo?
Yeah, WBGU 88.1 FM. I'll be on the call, I believe, with Chaz McNeil, if I'm not mistaken. That's a question for Lucas Kleinmeyer.
Well,
I checked the email.
That's
I
true.
I checked the email.
Ben and Chaz will be on the call. Yes, I'll have highlights.
He will have highlights, and everybody critique them as hard as you possibly can in the comments section of our YouTube channel, the BG Falcon Media YouTube channel, where we post rebroadcasts and highlight packages and other video content. But yeah, that's where you can find it. And then I'll be in DeKalb, Illinois for NIU this coming weekend. Also, WBGU 88.1 FM should be an exciting weekend, similar to the last two. So definitely something you want to tune in for. See a good Falcon performance and continue winning in the MAC. Hopefully, they coming out of this weekend, they're in the first seed, giving them the best chance possible.
Yeah, if you can't be at this throw on Tuesday, check it out online. It should be a really, really good one, I would think. That is going to do it for our volleyball discussion for today, and we are going to move into the last sport that had our significant action of the weekend before we start looking ahead at some other sports. But before we do that, I'm going to give Ben a little bit of a break and be a bit of a homer because the men's and women's cross-country teams both competed at the MAC Championships this weekend in Muncie, Indiana, and it was to a tune of very, very different results. For the women, they placed 4th overall in the MAC, a repeat of their team place last year, and now their 3rd time of the last 4 years placing 4th at the MAC Championships. Kylie Cubison, the junior, was second team All-MAC with her 11th place finish, conference honor that she received last year. And freshman Lexi Panning, who started the year running unattached, as many freshman runners tend to do, earned MAC Freshman of the Year honors with a 17th place finish. You look at the women's side, really a lot to like for what happened with them, and they'll look to build upon that when they go to the Great Lakes Regional in 2 weeks.
Is that a favorable finish for women's cross country, Holden? Like, is that a good year for the team finishing 4th in the MAC?
I think it's hard to say. It's hard to quantify to me what good is. I think the standard for any team is competing for a conference title. And while 4th doesn't sound great, it's not in the conventional 1, 2, 3 podium. When you look at the margins, the 3rd and 2nd teams, which I believe were Ohio and Akron, I could be mistaken on that, but Ohio was one of those two teams. Either way, the margins for Bowling Green was approximately like 102, 92, 82. So it was only about 10 points between 4 and 3 and 2. So in the scheme of things, not very distant at all from having a chance of being one of those podium spots. So,
and in fairness, there's nothing to do in Athens or Akron but run away. So that's probably why they're.
I believe it was Ohio and Eastern
Michigan.
Ohio
that's
and
right.
Eastern. Well, Ypsilanti's kind of the same thing. You're always running. But yeah, I based on what we talked about at the beginning of the year, I know didn't Carl Smith choose him as their favorite for the MAC championship?
Kool-Aid a little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
He certainly went on record buying a little. So my bad, Carl. For
do we know where they finished last season?
They finished 4th overall in the conference last season as well.
Mm-hmm. So no marked improvement or drop down.
No.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a pretty solid year for them, especially having Kaylee Cubison had some pretty good races as well. I know that. The freshman, obviously, did she run unattached the entire year? Or did she score?
She did
at
not
the
entire year, but the first, I think, 2 or 3 races, that was the case for her as well as Reese Riemann, another one of the freshmen, Amelia Barilla. Also,
but they're going to score the entire year
case.
next year, correct?
But yeah, they'll be, because now that they've competed in a certain number of races, I don't believe they maintain any redshirt status since they've been at the max and they're going to go to regionals presumably. But then, and so they should be contributing all year on the score sheet for the Falcons, which is huge.
That's good, young runners.
You look at Barilla, you look at Riemann, Lexi Panning, who earned the MAC Freshman of the Year. Reese Riemann, by the way, 17th, so only 6 places. Or, excuse me, no, she was 24th, I believe. So close margin to her teammate who got that MAC Freshman honors. A lot of young talent. transfer Madison Foster contributed in the scoring, as did Rachel Withrow, who's only a sophomore. And so the biggest inspiring thing to me, you look at the other two scorers, Kylie Covison, the junior, Regina Rose, a junior. Everybody on that team, barring anyone who may decide to transfer, it's hard to say. I can't say I'm the most knowledgeable about the transfer portal recruiting tactics
in
and
cross country
powerhouses in cross country. Yeah. But for what it's worth, the majority of the team should be returning next year, and that bodes very well for them. Conversely, the men's team finished last again, 9th. Only 9 teams compete as teams in the MAC. And to be honest, I'm not really sure what to make of it. You look at their top runner, Anthony Sweet. He finished 41st, which was a marked, worse finish than he had last year, but he's also dealt with some injuries on the year. And so that's a somewhat understandable result. And then you've got your only freshman and a walk-on who joined mid-season, who's just a sophomore, Jim Traska and Luke Lesueur, and they both finished in the bottom 4, I believe, which, again, you're younger, you're inexperienced, and so you can only build upon that. But I think it's a little bit disheartening probably for them to see not being able to make any improvement over, coming dead last again. I'd have to think that's a little bit frustrating for them.
Yeah, and I would imagine that there is a ton of room for adjustments to be made, obviously. Maybe over the season, you said there's a little bit of youth there and some transfer in. Maybe when you get them into the running system that you've implemented, you'll see improvement. Realistically, with 2 back-to-back 9th place finishes, you can't really finish any lower. So if your guys improve, you're going to be finishing higher. Maybe you look for a 6th, 7th finish or a 5th, 6th finish last year, maybe higher. Get some of those younger guys on a strong running system over the summer. I don't see any reason not to be positive when you have youth on a team. That goes for any sport.
And you look at the age of the runners on the team as well. Charlie Nowinski, the only senior on the team. Anthony Sweet, 5th-year undergrad student. They'll both not be running next year, barring any unforeseen eligibility that may emerge. But you look across the board, other than that, Micah Bentley, Bryce Weber, a couple of juniors. Hunter Seidel's a sophomore. Luke Lesueur's a freshman. Jim Traska's a sophomore. Josh Risco's a sophomore. So there's a lot of retention. But I also am curious to see what happens just in terms of numbers, because with Nowinski and Sweet leaving the team to graduation, their numbers are pretty low, and they had several races this year where they only had 4 or 5 guys, and 4 guys running, even if it's a mid-season meet that's not that important, that's not even enough to score a full team. You need full 5 to score, and then ideally a 6 and 7 to displace 6, 7, 8.
Did the MAC team in the MAC championship? Did they have?
They did have a full team running at the MAC championships. 7? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the only members of the team who did not run, I believe, are Hunter Seidel and Josh Risco, who I don't think was expected to run. But at any rate, it'll be interesting to see what happens if there's some more, recruiting and deep digging that needs to be done for Coach Snelling in the off season or looking into track season even.
Yeah, and it's cross country and running. Running's cumulative. You really only get faster. You don't get slower, barring injury or some unforeseen circumstance. So there's no reason to believe that any of those guys, especially as you said with younger guys, there's no reason to believe that they're not going to take a step forward. No pun intended. Take a step forward in cross country, but
not funny at all. Like, I'm sorry. It was like a 0 out of 10.
I didn't
joke.
try, Lucas.
Yeah,
That's why I said no pun intended. Okay.
I'll tell you didn't try.
All right, buddy. All right, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, yeah?
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay.
You want to come over here, buddy?
Love you, Ben.
Love you too, Lucas.
At any rate, it will be interesting to see, because you're right, you can only learn more and gain more experience. It's not the kind of thing where you necessarily have to be adapting. You look at football, learning playbooks, there's some systems, etc.
Yeah.
Running is learning about yourself and then largely just applying that against your competition.
How many guys really get slower? It's
right.
Not a lot. You've either completely maxed out or...
Because it's also any given day. It's not like you're running faster literally every race. You're going to have off days. You're going to have on days. But, cumulatively, you're not really looking to get slower. So both teams project to compete at the Great Lakes Regional November 15th. That's a Friday, and they'll run at noon. That's over at the Silver Creek Cross Country Park in Norton, Ohio. So a little closer than it's been in the past. And they will hope to see if any individuals are able to make a crack at the NCAA championship for cross country. But as the team performances look, it would be a bit of a contest for them to make it. Looking at a team like Toledo going four MAC championships in a row in cross country, that's certainly tough competition that you're going to see again at regionals. So that'll wrap that cross country coverage up. And as we approach the hour mark here, I'm going to float out a question that Mr. Ben Korak gave to me earlier in this week that I think is going to be a lot of fun to discuss.
Well, Ben threw it to you. It's probably not good.
Oh, God.
Oh, that's where you're wrong.
What is wrong with you today, Lucas? I think he's just mad
Lucas is
that
a
he was
hater.
negative about men's soccer last week, and I was positive, and I said they're going to beat Western Michigan, and they did. And I chose Trace Terry.
Ben
Call
picked
out.
his
Is
one
this gonna
right
be the
take out of
first ever
20.
fight in the Zig
One
Zone?
right take.
And he's like, yes.
Lucas, this is my question.
Go to the
I made the stipulation last week, and I did it. I plugged men's soccer, and I said, WBGU, PBS, go watch the men's soccer game. That means quite a sizable amount more than a first series of the year hockey game. Did you plug hockey in your broadcast of men's soccer?
I did not. Got me there.
Ooh,
I did not.
Oh, no.
tough scene.
I did not.
Wow. See, this is next time you ask me to write something, next time you ask me to write a CCHA preview 3.5 hours before it's due, I'll remember this.
Got it.
I'll remember this.
Tension in the studio. Hopefully that doesn't boil into the meeting later. We're going to go ahead and I'll float out to the question to you guys, and we will step away briefly, and then we will come back, talk about that, and we will get into some hockey action and look ahead at both basketball teams as they start off their season Monday. But the question for you guys to ruminate over as we take a quick break, election season is coming up, as we know, this Tuesday, in fact. If you could pick any head coach at Bowling Green State University to be your president, who would it be? Thank you, Ben, for that one. I've been giggling to myself when I remembered it all week thinking about this one. So give it a little bit of thought. We're going to step away. And when we come back, we will get into it. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to the Zig Zone on WBGU 88.1 FM.
In Bowling Green football's 41-17 season opening victory over Fordham on August 29th, junior Justin Pace set a program record with a 100-yard kickoff return touchdown on the first play of the game. Falcon Media Sports Network's Reese Patricus had the call on Falcon Radio.
Go back up and field it on the goal line. Trying to take to the right, got some blocks, got a hole. Peg was down the far sideline, and he's got space in front of him. 10, 5, touchdown BG brings back the opening kickoff. What a way to start the season.
This has been a Falcon Media Sports Network featured call.
You could listen to WBGU 88.1 FM, or you could be part of the action. Volunteer with WBGU FM in a variety of roles, including on-air, promotions, social media, music selection, and much more. Positions are always available to students and the local community. For more information, visit the WBGU Facebook page. Volunteer with Northwest Ohio's community radio station, WBGU 88.1 FM. The return to radio freedom.
Welcome back to the Zig Zone show. Before we went to break, I asked an election-based question. If you could pick any Bowling Green State University head coach to be the president of the United States, who would you pick? And gentlemen, what are we thinking?
Okay.
Oh, God.
Could you not see Todd Simon with an orange suit as president of the United States of America?
I can see it now that you mentioned it, yeah.
Is he hitting the transfer portal every year for military options?
Wow.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Wow.
I'm sorry. I need a new Secretary of State. Is there anybody in the portal?
That's crazy. Wow. No, but could
Starting
you
off
not see
strong.
Todd
I
Simon
could see
with
it.
an orange suit
I can
at
see
the
it.
podium of the
I can
seal?
see
I
it.
could see it.
Well, I thought he was actually going to say Kyle Halleck,
That's what I thought.
because I was going to go Todd Simon, but I don't want to be boring, because I was on the fence with these two. I'll go Fred Shamil. I'll go the other woman basketball coach, because just look at him. Does he not look like he'd be a president? Looks presidential.
So I don't know what you mean by that.
You just look at him like I feel like
He
you gotta
looks like
elaborate.
he commands the podium very well. In his press conference, there's a great picture of him pointing at everybody, showing everybody he's presidential, and he's got a good voice, like his voice.
So pointing
you
is
got me a little bit
presidential.
more
I
on
think
that speech.
voice wise, Todd Simon takes it though. Todd Simon has a great
Yeah,
voice.
I think my vote would have to be for Todd Simon as well. I feel like he's got a really good friendly presence around him that makes it like easy to root for and whatever. I think that would make a good president, in my opinion.
So for my answer, this is a stipulation: am I allowed to choose somebody that wasn't born in the United States?
Oh,
You
he's
are.
going Willie.
That's
I
just
am.
that's not how it works though.
Okay, but
Okay,
you
but-
said
This
who
is
we would
hypothetical.
choose.
But like
Yeah.
just
So-
Bowling
I didn't
Green
say they had to
coaches,
be allowed
like
to be a president.
That's also
Okay,
true.
that's fine.
That's
Whatever.
also true.
there's a write-in option. Lucas.
I'm not going
You
to
can write
choose.
whoever you'd like.
I'm not going to choose Willie. I'm going to choose Daniela Tomic.
Okay, that was gonna be my
Because
pick,
if there's
but-
anybody that can get you fired up over the United States, it would be Daniela Tomic. She would get you fired up about anything.
Yeah, but I see Dennis though. Now that you mention it, I think he'd be better because he just seems like one of the dudes, and
That is
I mean-
also so true.
like
That's so true.
I think having a dude in the office that'd be awesome.
I couldn't have a president with a Canadian accent.
That's
you know?
your deal breaker.
Yeah.
No, that's
Have
fair,
you sat
that's
in one
fair.
of his press conferences? They're
Yeah,
hilarious.
very funny. He's a funny guy. He is a funny guy, and but yeah, I think Danielle Tomic would be the.
I do have to
Would be
share
my
my
pick.
take on the matter, and it's half facetious and half not. And I made this comment to Ben earlier in the week, but I'm going to go with our football coach, Mr. Scott Leffler, with the stipulation that we know it takes time to implement the things you want to do, so we're relying on that re-election campaign.
But he's got a 5-year plan, and it every turns 4 years.
It's an 8-year plan.
He'll run on the 5-year
I mean,
plan.
that's why you vote
in
again.
midterms and the
Leffler
next
re-election
election.
2028.
Yeah.
I would vote. Yeah.
He's just got to hope the
No.
election takes place after the Toledo game,
This is bad.
and then we're all so high on him.
He might if it takes place after the Toledo game, he might break records. Like,
That's what I'm saying.
honestly, yeah,
It
like,
might be a clean sweep of all 50 states.
all orange.
All orange. All 50 states orange. That's good. Oh my gosh. Real talk, I would vote for Rodney Rogers.
Yeah, I
I
Oh,
think all of
absolutely.
us would.
I think
I feel like
everyone
that's a pretty
would.
safe
Yeah.
pick.
That's the only
Yeah.
president I know.
The whole-
I might write him in
Nothing but respect for my
Might write him
president.
for Rodney Rogers.
Rodney Rogers, 2024.
We should get everybody in Bowling Green to vote for Rodney Rogers so that it's a certain percentage of the vote and he has to pop up on the screen.
I think is that
As a percentage.
Is that considered like election fraud if you do that? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
You're a silly guy, Ben. He's already a president.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you got a point.
Can you be president like twice? Like if you're president of a university, can you be like the president of the United States as well? Like, is
You
that
might have to
allowed?
Probably not
resign.
concurrently.
Mm.
Yeah, maybe not concurrently.
Just move on.
Can it
please,
be like a
Holden.
part-time job? You know, like
Okay. Can the presidency be a part-time job, Artie?
no. I mean the president of the university.
Oh, okay. Anyways, we're gonna move on. We'll have one more discussion topic when we get to the end of this hour, but we're gonna step away real quick so we can do a station identification, and when we bring it back, we are going to get into looking ahead to the men's and women's basketball seasons, which will tip off tomorrow evening with Mr. Artie Abrego, Tyler Kavalitz, and Lucas Kleinmeyer, who comprise our men's and women's beats. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with the Zig Zone Show on WBGU 88.1 FM.
I'm BGSU graduate Jason Jackson from the Miami Heat, and you're listening to WBGU 88.1 FM, your home for BGSU women's basketball.
Welcome back to the Zig Zone Show, bringing you in with a little bit of Forward Falcons, certainly a classic here at Bowling Green State University. And without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into some basketball season looking ahead. So we'll start with Lucas. Why don't you start us off with the women's team?
Just in general?
Yeah, just in general. Just look ahead.
Well, I mean, obviously last year was first year under Fred Shamil. Kind of a frustrating season. He kind of touched on it a little bit. They had a lot of injuries last year, and he kind of talked about how he thought that the team probably overachieved a little bit last year. I mean, just above 500 record, lost in the first round of the MAC tournament to Buffalo. But all in all, honestly, if you look at a season from a Giant perspective, it was pretty successful. I mean, there were times where they had 2 players on the bench. I mean, they were dressing 7 players. They even called up a player from the club women's basketball team to dress towards like the back end of the season. But all in all, I think Shamil did what he could, especially with him adjusting to the MAC at all, coming from the SEC. He talked about how that was a big adjustment for him as well. And also losing Lexi Fleming for a majority of the year. She went down in December before MAC play even really began. So getting her back this year is going to be extremely important as well. But for this year, I'm very high on this team. I think one of the biggest positives to look for heading into this year is Paige Kohler. She had a great freshman season last year. I think seeing how she develops in her sophomore year as well. She played pretty good against Wittenberg in their exhibition game. Pretty good game. Obviously doesn't really count because it's a preseason game and doesn't really count for official record. So while they get Lexi Fleming back to full health, she'll probably be taking the reins on the floor along with Amy Velasco, kind of as the floor generals, trying to spread out the ball a little bit. Start the year, Erica Porter had an incredible season last year in her first year as a Falcon. Kind of felt like sometimes there's a little too much on Erica Porter a lot last year. Kind of the offense kind of ran through her in general every game because there weren't a lot of bigs that the team had, especially on the offensive end, to help. This year they've added a lot of size. 8 players this year on the roster are 6 foot or above. Last time they had that, they made the NCAA tournament. Players like Lauren Gherkin and Kendall Moxie are some newcomers this year. Christiana Kulachkovska coming over as well. She's another player that has a decent size as well. So those are players that can help on both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively, but can also help kind of take some of that pressure off Erica Porter this season. She was picked in the MAC preseason teams. In the preseason, I believe she was picked second team, and Amy Velasco was picked first team. Let me double check that real quick. Yeah, Velasco's named first team, Porter was second. So both those players are already getting first team honors for the start of the season. Amy Velasco in her last year with the Falcons as well had a great season last year, and she had to be because she was one of the few players that was healthy through all the games last year. And at one point, she played back-to-back games where she played 39 minutes and 30 seconds. So she pretty much played almost the entire game back-to-back. Taya Ellis coming back as well, and she started against Wittenberg, and I would think she is going to be projected to start tomorrow against Southern Miss. She's a player that adds a lot of size and a very good rebounder on both ends of the ball, but also a very good blocker. She had a couple of nice plays against Wittenberg as well. A freshman coming into this season that Coach Shamil and a lot of players have raved about is Johnny Donahue. Donahue is a very, very good defensive player. I talked to Lexi Fleming in my preseason preview, Paige Kohler, Shamil. They raved about Donahue, and seeing her finally for the first time in person against Wittenberg. I want to say she had something like 4 or 5 steals, a couple of passes that she just intercepted and was knocked out of bounds, but she was a pest on the defensive end, very physical, just in the grill of every player, very fast too, and kind of like knew what she was doing on the floor. Didn't seem like she was a freshman at all. It seemed like she adjusted very well to college basketball already, so it'll be kind of interesting to see how she gets to her start of the season. She was a player that really popped out of me as well, and I think that's a player that you're really going to look forward to because I think she's projected to start this season as well. She'll be the only freshman to start for Fred Shamil as well. They were picked to finish 4th in the conference in the MAC preseason polls. I think that's pretty fair. You know, Buffalo's a very good team. Toledo, while lost their great coach, has a new coach this year, still a very good team as well. Ball State's no sleeper as well. Ball State was picked towards the top. That's a very good team. That's probably the team that Bowling Green are going to need to beat or at least split. They want to contend for the top spots in the MAC. Those are really the 3 teams where you see how they do against those 3. Buffalo, Toledo, Ball State will kind of determine the outcome of how they stand. I think they're a good enough team to contend for the top spots. The only problem is how they do against those teams, but also are they going to stay healthy? Because honestly, as long as this team stays healthy and plays good basketball and is more disciplined defensively, which is another big talking point Shamil talked to me about in our preview and our interview sit down, I think they'll be in a very good spot this year. I think this is a very talented roster. This is Shamil's second year. He got a lot of new players. He's got his players, while last year, you still had the Morgan Sharps, the Olivia Hills, the Sophia Zekins, who are, most of them are BG legends in their own rights. They were here for a long time, especially with the Robin Freilich era. But now those players are gone, so a lot of new blood has been pumped into this team this year. I'm very excited to see this team this year. I think they could be off to a really positive start.
And I think you look at the returners from last year, and those who are able to stay healthy and play, I'm really intrigued to see how they take this forward. Especially, I really like what you said about Paige Kohler. I agree. I think it will be very, very telling about the kind of season that the team can have from what we are able to see from her. I mean, you look at last year's schedule. I mean, that team was battle tested, hosting South Carolina, the inevitable national champions, going to Iowa. I mean, that's
Caitlin Clark.
Indiana,
Caitlin Clark. At Indiana. That's the game Lexi got hurt. Their non-conference schedule definitely is easier than last year, but they still have a couple of tough opponents. Ohio State, West Virginia, Duquesne. Those are all pretty good teams. They're on the road, which places I'm excited to travel to. That'll be very fun to see, but it's going to come down to MAC play. That's what the team wants. The team wants to win a MAC championship. At least that's what Lexi Fleming told me. They want to contend. They want to be towards the top. That's what Fred Shamil wants. Shamil is not happy losing. Shamil wants to win. He comes from South Carolina, the best program in the country, and he was there for a long time. He wants to win, and he wants to do it well in the second year. Last year was a frustrating year, but he dealt with the cards that were dealt with him and had a pretty decent year.
Yeah, and another, I think, inevitable talking point, but definitely something to see will be the return of Lexi Fleming and how she's able to return to previous form.
Yeah, and also players like Lexi Fleming. We are a mid-sized Division I school, and the players don't get national recognition most of the time unless your name's Harold Fan Jr. But a lot of those players are, when you're in this community, when they become household names, you really got to hold on to them. Because this is a college town, yes, but it's also a small community in Northwest Ohio that loves their basketball teams. And Lexi Fleming is by far the biggest name on the team. She's been there, I want to say this is her 5th or 6th season. I'm losing track of how many seasons she's played this year. Even she was joking about how long she's been playing because she's had just so many injuries and has had to make up for it so much. Has had to sit out in red shirt as well. She's a player that when she comes back, she adds so much leadership to the floor, adds so much energy on the court, both ends of the floor, offensively and defensively. She's out there running around, chasing players. She's one of the most fun players to watch by far. And honestly, too, when she comes back, you kind of look at the starting five. Shamil's going to kind of roll out there. He's going to have a little bit of issues. I mean, they don't really want to play small because they were kind of forced to play small last year. If you kind of look right now, it's Erica Porter, Amy Velasco, Paige Kohler, Johnny Donahue, and Taya Ellis will be your starting five. But when Fleming comes back, do you want to go 3 guards? Do you go Velasco, Kohler, and Fleming? I don't think so, and I don't really get the sense Shamil really wants to do that. He kind of wants a more balanced 5. So do you take out Kohler and have Kohler run the second team? You're not going to take out Velasco. So are you going to take out Donahue? Donahue might be one of your top defensive players, and she's also a freshman. So maybe you take out her, maybe Taya Ellis. Obviously we're projecting a long way away, but those are good problems to have, and it's problems that they didn't have last year. Last year, Shamil was just looking at practice and saying, all right, who do I have healthy this year? Who can I have put together and do a 5? And can I rely on a freshman in Kohler to play 38 minutes and basically run the offense when Velasco's not out there? So, that'll be an interesting talking point towards when Fleming comes back. But right now, just focusing on what they have right now. Southern Miss, good Sun Belt team, had a good season last year. Played a couple of MAC teams, split a couple of those results last year. Very interested to see it opening night, and I'm very excited for that one.
For reference to our earlier note, the 2020-2021 season was Lexi Fleming's first year here, and she still, per the BGSU Athletics website, maintains a year of eligibility after this one.
Yep.
So that's quite the tenure here. What do you expect to see in the conference opener, or the MAC Sun Belt Challenge opener here?
Yeah, I didn't really cover the games last year for both programs, men's or women's, when they came to play. Those games are interesting because it's kind of a clash of styles of basketball that you don't see a lot between the Sun Belt and the MAC. Obviously, the MAC basketball is a completely different style, both men's and women's. Obviously, it's the first game of the year, so I expect it to be low scoring, and I expect it to be kind of slow starting probably for both teams. I guarantee you both teams aren't going to shoot the ball as well as both would like. Because it's just early season and you're not in a rhythm yet. There's 30-plus games to play. I expect a hard physical game, per se. From what I've seen with Southern Miss is they are a big team, similar to what BG is this year. So probably going to be a physical game, probably going to be a lot of fouls. Probably the battle in the paint is probably going to decide the outcome of this game. I think if you're Bowling Green, I think the biggest thing you want to look for is, can you knock down your open shots, and also can you be more disciplined on the defensive end? Because a lot of times last year they were not. And I think you're going to look for players like Ty Ellis and Johnny Donahue to kind of lead that, if those are the starting 5 on the court for Shimio, which I'm 99.9% sure they're going to be.
99.9%. That's a high percent of certainty.
It is high. But I'm overall just very, very excited to watch this team. I think they can be in store for a big second year. The girls they have on the squad this year seem very connected, just from the videos they've been around, from practice, just by talking to them, just kind of the overall feeling around the team this year, especially with Shimiel's second year, retaining both of his staff as well. So it's kind of a more familiar feeling than it is when the first year when you have a whole new coaching staff and coaching system in place as well. But yeah, Women Hoops, man, starts tomorrow. I mean, the team gave us an incredible run a couple years back with Robin Freilich. So, I mean, Shimiel looks to capture that magic once again this year.
Yeah, where can we keep track of that game tomorrow, Lucas?
WBGU 88.1 FM. I'll be alongside this team all season long. Myself and Kaden Knapp will be on the call. Obviously, we'll have a recap and a sidebar on bgfalconmedia.com, along with some highlights on BG Falcon Media YouTube and photos as well. We'll have the full slate of coverage as well for tomorrow. And hopefully the Stroh Center is packed. Hopefully it's packed. Obviously, Ziggyville's been pretty good with Derek Vandermeer, so hopefully they show up once again and for the women's opener.
Always want to see a packed Stroh. Truly a great environment here at Bowling Green for us. We're going to move on. Well, actually, one more thing I do want to say also is I think what you said is very, very important to take away, and I felt like it'll be the case when we look ahead to women's soccer next year with Chris Fox. I think the second year under a coach is a lot more telling, possibly the most telling of the direction that the program could be heading under them. At any rate, we are going to move on to men's basketball, who, largely speaking, has a little bit less continuity from last year in terms of the roster. So. Tyler and Artie, you guys can, by all means, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, they added 10 new players in the offseason, which when Coach Simon first came here, he added 9 new players as well. So it's sort of that consistency through the transfer portal, but it's pretty much a new-look team, essentially, a new style of play. Returning players-wise, Trey Thomas, Greg Spurgeon, Sam Towns, and John Humphrey, those are the only players remaining from last year's squad that made the MAC tournament. And then you have all these new names, Jackson Pardon, Braylon Green, Javante Campbell, Marcus Johnson, Wilkins Jr. exec, Derek Butler, Muhammad Maxid, Preston Squire, and Yusuf Kayet, and Ajim Adim, and then Jemai Felt, who has been on the injury reserve for about 2 seasons now, so he's finally healthy, so he's finally gonna, hopefully, we'll see him play this year.
Yeah, I mean, what Artie said, it is a completely, which, Simon last year, basically completely new team. Same thing this year because of the amount of players that they lost. I think a big thing to note is you lost your 3 top players from last season.
Yeah.
Marcus Hill transferred to NC State. Rashawn Agee transferred to USC. Jason Spurgeon graduated. He's now on a 3-year contract with the Sydney Kings playing professional basketball in Australia back home. But one thing that this team did do that Todd Simon addressed throughout the season and at the end of last season was that they needed shooting. Every one of these players that he added can shoot. So that is something to note, that they're not going to have a lack of shooters on this team. It'll just be interesting to see how long it takes them to get going. Last season, they had a relatively easy non-conference schedule. They got going pretty quick. It's the injuries that came on later in the season. They got a little more beat up. They slowed down as they went. This year, you have a little tougher non-conference. You welcome Davidson in for the home opener, one of their highest-ranked opponents by ratings and metrics at the Stroh Center in a while, especially for home openers. And then you have to go to places like Michigan State. You have some pretty tough non-conference opponents through the MAC Sunbelt stuff. But we'll see if they're able to get a quick start again, or if this is going to be more of a kind of you start slow and you have to find it throughout the season.
Yeah, I mean, when we talked to Coach Simon for our season preview, which is available on falconmedia.com right now that you can read, he talked about that was by design. He wanted the non-conference schedule to be as tough as possible because he wants his team to get better. And the only way you can track those improvements is through those tough games because you see how your team plays. So Michigan State, Davidson, obviously the home opener, like Tyler mentioned, these are tough games, and it's really going to test this squad to see how well they play as a unit together.
It feels like a really strong through line through all of Falcon athletics, and I feel like you guys can probably all attest to this because we've all been at least one of these games. When you look at our sports teams in the last couple of years, they've been very, very consistent about, even though it's not what matters for their conference tournament, the out-of-conference schedules have been really, really tough. You look at football this year, at Penn State, at Texas A&M, at Michigan last year. You look at women's basketball last year, you're playing at Iowa with Caitlin Clark. You're hosting the inevitable national champions. How often do you think it is that a mid-major school has a team play against two different national champions in the same year? I couldn't pull that number out. I don't know. But, it's crazy to me to have seen Bowling Green compete against two national champions last year. That's wild.
I think the biggest thing, too, with men's you look is they're probably still locked into some kind of deals with some schools that probably from the previous Michael Huger era. I think Todd Simon, as the more he gets along the years, you're going to see more nationally ranked teams or more opponents like Michigan State. It's non-conference, and maybe even teams that come to the Stroh Center that are of those quality teams as well. But it's pretty cool to see all programs play nationally ranked teams, but also just hard non-conference opponents that give you national spotlight, but also just give you good experience and test you for the better.
To Lucas's point there, they had, I forget exactly what it was called, but the tournament up in Canada last year where they faced, I think, 3 teams. This year they have one down in Arizona. So one of the teams they're facing is Weber State. They've been predicted by some groups there to win their conference. So it might not look the strongest non-conference on paper, but there are a decent amount of pretty good teams that this team's going to face very early on. I mean, Michigan State is 4th matchup of the year. So that one's going to come real quick. They're going to learn exactly what type of team they have right away when they face the Spartans on November 16th.
Talk to me a little bit. We already went over it with the women's side. Moving from non-conference to conference, what are people around the MAC saying about the Falcons? Where are the projections standing, and what do either of you think?
So, internally, it's to win the MAC title. That's their goal. That's their expectation. All of them talk about it. They made it last year. That was their goal to make it. Now it's to win it. Externally, I think some people are still counting them out. I think they were picked 5th.
They were picked 5th in the MAC preseason poll.
5th in the MAC preseason poll. Interestingly, Ohio was picked to win it. I think Akron are the favorites. They got, I think, 4 Power 5 transfers. I just don't think they're picked to win it right now because nobody knows how they're going to fit into that system. I trust John Gross, though. I think Akron is the favorite. I think Bowling Green's going to finish higher than that 5th mark, though. With that said, one of the big motivational points for this team is Bowling Green men's basketball has not made the NCAA tournament since 1968. That is tied for the 3rd longest drought in the nation. They're tied with Columbia. They only trail Tennessee Tech, who made it in 1963, and Dartmouth, who made it in 1959.
Wow.
So this team, sure, it was great making the MAC tournament for the first time in 2 seasons last year. I think it was their first win since 2018, 2019, or 2019, 2020, something like that. They want to win it this year, and they have the pieces. It's just how will they get them to come together? How will the health stay? But the MAC is a very good conference. Toledo is always good. Rob Senderoff and Kent State are always good. Kowalczyk up there in Toledo. Ohio is always good. Akron's always good. Those are the 4, I would say, perennial powerhouses in the MAC. Those are probably the 4 teams, along with maybe, depending on how it shapes out, maybe a Miami, a Ball State. But those 4 teams are the teams that Bowling Green's probably going to have to get through if they want to win the MAC.
Yeah, and to Tyler's point, when it comes to breaking 5th in the preseason poll, I think it's sort of the same situation as Akron, which maybe Bowling Green to add they added 10 new players in the offseason. So it's a completely new squad, and to people's view, this is Todd Simon's 2nd year as head coach with an entirely new group aside from a few players. So I think that's part of the reason.
You also got to think about it. It's the coaches pool. So these are Mid-American Conference coaches who have seen all of the guys in the MAC play, who knows how much they've seen all these guys that Bowling Green added
Absolutely.
play up until this point.
Like,
So
I mean, Todd, to your point, like you interviewed a lot of them. A lot of these guys come from like JUCO backgrounds, like Marcus Hill did. So like we haven't seen them play against like the Mid American Conference. So that may be part of the reason too. But also, they are, like Tyler mentioned, they are obsessed with getting to the MAC tournament. Like Coach Simon mentioned, like 1968. That's like some of their phone numbers, their alarms, just numbers they put everywhere because they are obsessed with getting over the hump of winning a MAC tournament, getting to the NCAA tournament, and finally breaking that record of being the 4th longest streak in the country.
Yeah, it really seems like. And this is something we've talked about over and over and over again, but I think really most programs here are at the point where, they feel like with the coaches in place and the athletes on their rosters that they can compete or be a team that can make a run at a MAC title and in a sport like basketball. I think most people tend to agree that football is kind of the top attention grabber at most colleges, but basketball, right up there for most, or sometimes the highest, and it's been long overdue.
And men's basketball has the momentum from last season. You
Absolutely.
look 2 years ago with Huger, they lose, I believe it was 10 of their final 11 games in the Michael Huger era. That team, you could just tell, there was a disconnect in that locker room second half of that season. The Michael Huger era had kind of run its course. He got him to a MAC tournament championship. He did good things with this program. It was just time for that to end. I think they only won 10. I think they won 11 and 20 overall that year.
They did go 11 and 20.
Yeah. So then you go back to last year. They get a 20-win season. One of just 10 teams in the country to go from 20 losses to 20 wins. So even though you did add 10 new players, you still have 5 returners, 4 of which who played last year. And I think already did touch on it. Jemai Felt, the one guy who did not play last year, didn't play the past 2 seasons. It looks like he's going to be healthy. We'll see if he goes right away. Todd Simon did talk about it's going to take a little bit for him to go. He hasn't ever seen action in an actual collegiate basketball game, even though he's technically a junior academically. Redshirt freshman athletically. But this team has all of the momentum from last season because of some of these returners. So it's a very talented team.
Absolutely. And it feels like they have, maybe you would agree with me, but it feels like they can space the floor more. Because obviously you mentioned we added shooters. So it was last year was a very inside-dominated basketball team because they were always attacking the interior because they couldn't really shoot. They didn't really have any standout shooters. I believe Jason Spurgeon led in three-point shooting with like 33%.
He did. It was not a high percentage. But, for example, Marcus Johnson, he's 6'7", 265. Granted, it was at Wheeling, but over his seasons there, he shot 47% from the field, 45% on three-pointers, and 91% from the line.
My question for you two, Tyler and Artie, is obviously this is the second straight year where they essentially have a whole new roster again, but this is also a year where they have Todd Simon. It's not a new coach, and this same coaching staff. How does this team kind of avoid a sophomore slump under Todd Simon?
I think you just have to maintain consistency. You got to prove to.
How do they do that?
I think you just have to play like. Obviously, you're in like a new style of playing together. You're there's a lot of inside game, as I mentioned. So you just have to prove that you can shoot, that you can space the floor, that you can play and win basketball in other different ways besides the way you were playing last year, and then you can beat these top teams in the Mid-American Conference.
I think the returning coaching staff, Trey Thomas and Sam Towns, are the answer for that. You carry over the exact same coaches. You do have, it was a director of ops change. That's the only thing. But you have the same assistant coaches. And then...
Keep going, yes.
You were saying...
Yeah, and then Trey Thomas and Sam Towns are your two big returners from last season. Trey Thomas, Todd Simons called him the floor general. It always goes back to Trey Thomas whenever this offense gets reset. He played at UCF. He's a veteran of college basketball. He's going to be the level-headed guy of this team. He is the main leader of this team this year. And then the other main leader is Sam Towns. He's been with this team now 3 years. He's the most veteran Falcon on this team. Started his career at Ohio, transferred to Bowling Green the final year of the Huger era. So those two guys are going to be the two guys this team's going to look towards whenever they hit rough patches. And just having that same coaching staff is going to help this team be able to adapt throughout the year like they were last year.
And Tyler, when you and I interviewed Preston Squire for the scene for you, he specifically shouted out both Trey Thomas and Sam Towns as a guy that he could talk to and a guy that helps the team believe in themselves, and he views them both as leaders on the team.
It really feels like a strong asset for the team when you don't have a high amount of continuity from last year's squad that, as you said, certainly
I
has
will
a lot
say
of
one
momentum.
thing with the continuity thing, though. This team did have the opportunity to go to Europe earlier in the year. So they got to spend, I think it was about 4 or 5 days in Europe. They played against a couple European teams over there, won both games. But that gave them the opportunity for all 15 players to be around each other, learn about each other, play basketball with each other before the actual practice windows opened up for college basketball. So they had the opportunity to basically start their preseason a few weeks earlier than most other teams in the country. So that gives them a little bit of a head start in terms of continuity and learning each other and how to play with the rest of the team.
I have a question for you guys because based on what I just heard, we talked about a lot of different names, a lot of different faces, new styles of play for certain guys. From a general standpoint and for a casual BGSU basketball fan, who do you think the best player is going to be? Like if you had to label, I think it was safe to say either Rashawn Agee or Marcus Hill were our guys last year. They just were.
See, going into the season last year, nobody thought Marcus Hill.
I agree. So what are your guys' takes for who, by the end of the season, who are we going to say our best player was?
That's a tough one.
It's really tough to predict now because there are so many new people on this team.
Yeah, that was my point. Because I was thinking about it, and I was like, last year we kind of knew who our guys were.
I think it's going to be...
Trey Thomas and Sam Towns do have that because we know them and we know how they play because they're returning.
I think it's going to be Yusuf Kayat.
I agree.
I think Yusuf Kayat from Lebanon. He plays for the Lebanese national team. Spent the past 2 years at Michigan, played in 26 games, started one. It sounds like a lot, but he didn't play much there. So he did not get much of an opportunity to shine. When he entered the transfer portal and left, a lot of Michigan fans were unhappy. They wanted to keep him. That's telling when a Power 5 program loses someone and they want to keep him when he goes to a lower level. I think he has the chance to dominate here in the MAC. He is fully focused on basketball if you talk to him. He only cares about basketball when he's on the court. And he's someone that I think with the pieces around him has the chance to be just the X factor for this team.
And I think it's really interesting. I think it's going to be one of the most exciting teams of the year to watch, just because of the number of newcomers who we haven't seen play in a Falcon uniform yet. The coaching staff is kind of like kids in a sandbox experimenting with different configurations of lineups. And
that's the tough thing. I don't even know exactly who Simon's going to put out there on Monday. You look at it, Trey Thomas is going to start. There's one guard. You know that Derek Butler's probably going to start, and Yusuf Kayat's going to start. So there's 3. You would probably lean towards Marcus Johnson, so that leaves that last spot open. Do you put in Braylon Green, very electric, athletic guard there? Do you put in Wilkins Jr. Exact? He's a Utah transfer but didn't play last season due to injury. Don't expect Jemai Felt this early. If you go big, do you go Sam Towns or do you go Preston Square if you want more shooting? So you have 3 or 4 spots pretty solidified. It's a good problem that he's going to have of figuring out who to play, and he might just ride the hot hand some of these games because he's going to have most likely 10, 11, 12 guys that are going to contribute every single game.
I think this is going to be one of the portions of the season where he really experiments with his lineup, rotating guys in and out, as Tyler said, because it's tough to really lock down these spots. So I think Trey Thomas is obviously going to start game 1 and probably every single game. But I think it's going to be a lot of rotating lineups and just to see what works, what doesn't work in this non-conference schedule.
And that's the benefit of this year's team. Last year we saw it down the stretch. The depth just wasn't there. You were having to bring guys like Jay-Z Zaire off the bench at the end of the season to contribute baskets.
Hey,
which,
he declared for the NBA draft.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
Jay-Z Zaire.
Did he get drafted?
He did not get drafted. He went undrafted.
He did not get drafted. And lost his collegiate eligibility because of that. So I think that was just him signaling. Basketball.
Yeah.
So, but you were leaning towards guys like him and Anthony McComb down the stretch. You have a lot more depth this year. Instead of going to guys like that, you'll be going to guys like Javonte Campbell and Braylon Green. And now DeJohn Humphrey, who started a lot of games last year, he's more than likely 99% going to be coming off the bench to start this year. So Simon's going to have... He's going to be able to make a puzzle a little bit more this year instead of trying to put something together.
I'm just excited to watch Marcus Johnson.
He is going to be a matchup nightmare.
I think he's going to be a fan favorite.
He's
honestly.
going to be a matchup nightmare.
If I were to predict a fan favorite from this team, it would be Marcus Johnson.
Yeah, I mean, basically imagine someone an inch or two shorter than LeBron, about 15 pounds less than LeBron. I'm putting the size.
Imagine LeBron.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Marcus Johnson is the next LeBron
I'm
James.
trying
LeBron
to-
tablets, everybody.
The decision 2024
He is from
coming to
the
Bowling
same
Green.
city in high school as LeBron.
Taking his
He did go to
talents
St.
Bowling Green,
Vincent
Ohio.
St. Mary's.
Oh my gosh.
No, but he's not much smaller than a guy like LeBron, but he's a little wider. But
You're totally down on LeBron.
no,
Use another
The
player.
only
in your
basketball
comparisons.
player I know is LeBron.
Who's the most comparable to EJ Greer? Because he was my
Oh
favorite
my
player. I love
E.J.
EJ Greer.
But Marcus Johnson's a guy who Simon's going to be able to use as a 3-point shooter or put down low. Last season, you didn't really have that guy. You tried to use Jason Spurgeon as it. The problem was Spurgeon, he was basically relegated to only outside shooting because you had no one else that could step into that role. This year, you will have someone else. So Marcus Johnson will not be a guy that will just sit out on the outside. He'll be able to sit out on the outside, but also he's a much better ball handler than Jason Spurgeon was. So he'll be able to drive inside. He'll be able to shoot mid-range, shoot three-pointers, rebound, go off the low block, go outside in the corners. He'll be able to do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, really looking forward to seeing how they put it together because there feels like the sky's the limit for potential for the team. Well, I think that is going to do it for our men's basketball. Time to move on to the ice. Had some good success this weekend at the hockey team. Ben, why don't you talk about it?
Yes, sir. Lost both against Ohio State, but a pretty good series. And then in the first series of CCHA play in the 2024-2025 season, they took a 2-0 victory over Ohio State in the first night. Goals from Maxwell Martin, his second of the great freshman season. And then Matvey Kabanov, a transfer in from Northern Michigan, found the back of the net and rounded off scoring the first day 2-0. And then there was immensity of scoring in the second game, a lot of which I'll say this. In the first game, Bowling Green and Fair State together were 0 for 11 on their power play opportunities. In the second game, the scoring summary extends to 9, 6 of which are on power plays, as well as Brody Waters getting all 3 of his goals on a power play in the first hat trick of his career. Also the first time he scored 3 points in a game. Brody Waters had what I would imagine to be the game of his life. And when Bowling Green needed him to, Gustav Stjernberg also scored on a power play in the second. And then Jackson Niedermeyer, 10 minutes into the third, his first goal and point in a BG uniform in the form of a game winner and series sweep against Ferris State. And they're currently, not that it matters, but they're sitting at the top of the CCHA with Michigan Tech. So a good first series. We saw some very good things, some physicality, shot volume, won a lot of faceoffs, made some great adjustments period to period, which is something we lacked a little bit last year. We're able to manufacture some momentum here and there in parts where you were coming off a penalty kill or something like that. Really, especially the penalty, you were able to turn around from 0-6 the day before to I believe Bowling Green was 4 for 7 on power plays the next day. So you were just able to do a complete 180 from one 7 o'clock game to the next 7 o'clock game, and just an impressive display in especially that second game when it went back and forth through the second period, and then a newcomer transfer, Jackson Niedermeyer, able to fill the last one, and great start to the CCHA season for Bowling Green.
Yeah, and as you said, the record is not as impactful as you could pretend it is this early into the season. But even so, you look at starting 2-0 in the conference, and that's great momentum to get. And you look at the overall wins counting the non-conference, only Minnesota State, who's 1-1 in CCHA play, has more wins than Bowling Green does in the CCHA. And I think it's indicative of kind of a hot start and really good momentum for the team under Willie.
I believe they also have the best goal ratio as well. Maybe St. Thomas, but they have 7 goals for and 4 goals against in CCHA, which is pretty good ratio. Ferris State's not a great team. I think they're going to be a bottom 3 team. They are a little bit better than they were last year, but the things that we saw from Willie and his team were very promising. He switched up the lineups both days. We had an entire line of newcomers. I believe it was Jackson Niedermeyer, Johannes Lückerberg, and Matvey Kabanov, the fourth line of Falcons yesterday, and that line scored once in their first time playing together, which is huge. And all of them their first time with Bowling Green, a freshman, transfer sophomore, and a transfer senior, I believe, in Jackson Niedermeyer. So he's able to switch up the lineups and find success from it, which is really nice to have that kind of depth, that you're not relying on the same guys in and out. If one of the guys isn't producing to the level you want them to, you scratch him and you find somebody and put him in the lineup that you can. And he's been very vocal about his willingness to do that, to scratch certain players if you're not playing well. Yesterday's game, actually, if you look at the scorecard or the individual stats page, Brett Foe's not on it, and that's because he was scratched yesterday. He scored 2 goals in the second game against Mercyhurst, second game of the season, and he hasn't scored a point since. So he didn't deem that Brett Foe was playing very well, and he sat him, and he had good success coming from that. Not because Brett Foe was sitting, but it's just the idea that he replaced Brett Foe with guys that were fighting for a spot, and those guys may have performed better on the power play or just generally. And it's just a constant influx and outgoing forwards, especially just constant in and out for Willie's team, and that's good. It's keeping the guys accountable, making sure that they're fighting for their position. They're not given anything; they have to fight for it, and that's big on a hockey team, especially a large hockey team. I think they have 28, 29 guys, so not everybody gets to travel, not everybody gets to play, not everybody gets to dress. So every game, every practice matters, and that's what Willie's trying to institute.
And I think something you said too, they don't have to rely on somebody to consistently be the one person putting the team on their back or anything. But something I do want to highlight is what I think has been just a strong consistency for them. We've talked about him plenty. But Cole Moore, first shutout of the season for him on Friday night, his second in his career, as I recall. I mean, that's really nice to see.
Yeah, I think it's going to be sad this year for Cole Moore. And the reason I say that is Willie's a high shot volume guy. But their defense is decently strong, but they also give up a lot of shots. In which case, when a lot of shots are flying toward you, your ability to save them goes down a little bit. And for a scoring focused team, your defense lacks off a little bit in certain parts, and Cole Moore does not benefit from that statistically. So this weekend we saw a 4-goal outing yesterday. I think he had 25 saves to go along with it. If you just look at the stat sheet, it's not really that impressive. I think that's just above a 900 save percentage on the game, but he played way better than 4 goals allowed and 25 saves says, especially in the third period when it was a tie game until Niedermeyer scored the goal. He stood on his head. Willie said in the postgame that he elevated his game in that third period when they needed him to. He stepped up a lot of kicks. He's so good with directional blocking, keeping it away from the opponent jerseys and finding his own, blocking the puck, not just stopping it, but making sure it goes to the right side of the ice. And I've been really impressed with him, almost more than last season, and his statistics don't bear that out. But I think that's just the way the system is for Bowling Green, and it's not, when you're looking at stats, it's not to say that Cole Moore has been any worse. He's been just as good. It's just because he's the system's not benefiting him, and defense is a effort thing, and later in the season when effort's going to be a huge portion of Willie's preaching, the defense is going to get better, and he by proximity is going to get better as well. So Cole Moore's great. He's going to be great. We're hoping he's in the net almost every game for the Falcons. He's got decent players behind him, but he's the guy. He's one of the best in the CCHA. So having him in the net every game is just a huge positive for Bowling Green hockey.
And I want to look at also another just phenomenal individual performance from the weekend. Brody Waters with a hat trick.
Yeah.
I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, I mean, that was another one that coming into the broadcast, we talked about how he scored 3 goals the first 3 games of the season and then was on a 4-game scoring drought, didn't even score a point. And then he came out in one game and scored 3 goals. He's kind of the guy that you find next to the net. He's kind of the filler guy. You take deep shots from defensemen or something. I believe on the first one especially, Kabanoff passed it to Norris on the near side boards, and Norris shot it in, and Brody Waters was there to fill it off the rebound. And it was a beautiful play, and Waters is one of those guys that he wears slashes, he wears cross checks in front of the goalie to get him out of there, and he reaped the benefits of it. He wasn't able to find the net, but he was there in the right time, in the right place 3 times in a row, and he capitalized on it. Fantastic weekend from him. It's just a very gritty player. It couldn't have happened to a better player, a guy that works harder. So definitely kudos to Brody Waters for the weekend. Little bit deceiving to see 6 goals on his stat sheet because like I said, 3 games to start 3 games with 3 goals to start the season, then a 4-game drought, and then 3 in 1 game. So he's really only, with his 6 goals, he's only scored in 4 games, but still fantastic. From fantastic stuff from him, especially yesterday, and I think going forward we're going to see a lot of individual performances flourish like that with the system Willie's implementing.
Looking ahead, they have next weekend off, and then they'll travel and play the St. Thomas Tommies for Friday, Saturday, November 15th and 16th. Are you going to be there, Ben?
I will, yeah. St. Paul or Minneapolis, however you figure it. I think they say it's St. Paul. St. Thomas is good. They're a very good team. We knew that from last year. They didn't succeed to how we would have expected them, but they had a lot of injuries mid-year, especially to forwards, so they kind of took a step back the second half of the year. They brought back so many players. Their goaltenders, especially Jake Seidel, is just absolutely outstanding. Aaron Trotter is great as well. They have one of the best 1-2s in the CCHA. So whoever you get, it's going to be a tough game. So it's going to be a tough series, very telling series to how the Falcons are going to deal with very strong adversity coming off of an easier opponent in Ferris State. But St. Thomas is their first harsh test of the year. Your 3 teams to beat, as I would say, is Minnesota State, Bemidji State, and St. Thomas. So out of those, out of those 3, you're facing one of them very early. You're getting them out of the way, and that's going to be like I said, huge telling series on how Willie's team is going to perform, especially under pressure and against a team that might even be better than you are.
And do you have a strong expectation for a certain result in that one?
I think they split. It's so tough in the CCHA to take two wins so many times. So many times the teams, whoever takes the first one doesn't take the second one. So it's going to be tough for them to take 2. I think they take 1. I think St. Thomas wins the first one, and then Bowling Green comes out, makes adjustments, and the second one plays. They're going to play out of St. Thomas's hands, and I think they split the series, which is still good. You take a couple of sweeps against teams you're supposed to sweep, and then you split against teams that might be better than you, and you have a winning record. So a split is definitely not a bad thing. It might not look the greatest, but against one of the best teams in the CCHA, you'll definitely take a split weekend.
Well, it'll be an exciting one to see. We'll have to wait a little bit for that one, but it's just around the corner. We're going to just look ahead at the upcoming action for BGSU Athletics quick, and then we are going to wrap up here. Tomorrow, the men's basketball team will travel to Southern Miss, while the women's team will host Southern Miss at the Stro. On Tuesday, The football team travels to Central Michigan for a 7:30 kickoff, a little midweek action. Toledo will be coming to the Stroh Center in volleyball action. Men's soccer will be at Oregon State on Wednesday. Volleyball will play against Northern Illinois on Friday, and Saturday in DeKalb, men's basketball hosts Davidson. Women's basketball will be at Detroit Mercy. And then coming up that following weekend is the next time that the hockey team will be in action when they travel to the St. Thomas Tommies. As always, stay tuned in to Falcon Radio as well as WBGU 88.1 FM for all the calls of home action and some away action. And stay tuned to bgfalconmedia.com for recaps, highlights, photos, and more of all the action going on in Falcon athletics. And that's going to do it for us. For Ben Korak, Artie Abrego, Nick Windholtz, Lucas Kleinmeyer, and Tyler Kavalets, I'm Holden Ruck. Thanks for tuning into the Zig Zone, and as always, I Ziggy.
This broadcast has been a Falcon Media Sports Network production. For more BGSU sports news and updates, follow Falcon Media Sports Network on Twitter X at BG_FMSN, BG Falcon Media on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, and head over to BGFalconMedia.com.